Are we live?
Why don't you check that on your end? Hi guys.
Hello.
All right, I think we are live.
Hello, and welcome to day 4 of the Black Hat Comics Rocky Mill Peters pre-Comic-Con Comic-Con. The pre-Comic-Con Comic-Con is meant to give you a little taste of some of the things that they do at the big show, San Diego Comic-Con, coming up next week. And so today, day 4, is panel day. We've got 3 panels for you today. We've got Getting Into Comics, we've got Collecting Vintage Comics, and we've got Superheroes Unleashed, Society and Our Need to Be Saved. So to begin, we thought we'd start with Getting Into Comics. With me, I have co-founder of Black Cat Comics, Francesca Sordo. How you doing, Francie?
Great.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about why you wanted to do this panel particularly?
Sure. So I've been reading comics for over 20 years now, but I still feel like I'm one of the young ones. And I can still remember walking into comic shops 20 years ago and being completely overwhelmed by everything that I was seeing. The layout, what's a trade, what's a comic, how often do these things come out? And so I wanted to, for a long time, do kind of a video of kind of Comics 101 to kind of help folks kind of get into the industry and to help them understand, you know, what comic book collecting is all about. Things that I wish I would have known that took me sometimes 10, 20 years to figure out. So that's kind of what started this panel idea.
That's great. I get that call here at the shop all the time, especially now with all the movies coming out over the last many years now. People say, okay, I saw this movie, I love this character, how do I get into comics? And as you're saying, it can be a little overwhelming, it can be very complicated, and frankly, it turns off a lot of newbies because of it. And so this sort of thing is really important, and I'm glad you put all this together. You've got a lot of visual aids, you've got a lot of great notes. Why don't we go ahead and get started?
Okay, great. So first, the basics, like what is a comic? So I've got some examples to show you. Comic. Comics are usually, you know, 22 to 30 some odd pages, and they come out on a regular basis. They're periodicals. So they're either once a month, you get a new issue, like this Batman versus Steed and Mrs. Peel, or every other week. They come out twice a month. New comics come out every Wednesday, so every comic shop gets a huge shipment that they put out of new books every Wednesday. Your issue might not come that Wednesday, it might come the next Wednesday or the Wednesday after, but comics are a periodical, so they come out on a regular basis. Couple of things to note that's kind of hard for the newbies is you've got a comic, what issue number is it, right? What issue in the series does this fall into? So if you can see right up there, there's a number 6, and some of the publishers make it kind of challenging to figure out what number it is, as is in Walking Dead. It's really small right up there. That's the issue number, Hellboy, number 10, right? So when you see those numbers, you know that's the issue number in the series. You can have something like Batman Detective Comics, which actually is on issue number, I don't know if you can see that, 960. That's almost 1,000 issues. Does that mean you have to go back and read 1,000 issues? No. Most comics, even though they've got, you know, long numbers like this, have like 4 to 6 mini story arcs. They've got creators that have like a mini story that they tell within the larger arc of the long title. You can pick up any book at any time and get started reading them. Now, a lot of folks don't realize that the publishers, which I'll talk about next, kind of only go to press once or twice with these individual single issue comics. What does that mean? That means that these are not always available to order. There's a finite number of comics that go to press.
Usually between 50 and 100,000.
Yeah. So once your store sells out, you know, they've got maybe a small chance of being able to reorder them, then that's it. So then what do? What happens when you're just coming into the store, you pick up an issue, you're like, I love this book. How can I get the others? Oops, guess what? They're out of print. What do? Well, so they have this awesome invention called trade paperbacks. So the trades are reprints of about 4 to 6 issues of these single comics. And they usually keep these books in print for a long time. So these are something that you can definitely pick up and read from just about any comic book store. Will have a chunk of these trade paperbacks. Like for instance, this one covers the Batman Detective, collects issues 1 through 7. It'll say it kind of on the back what issue numbers it collects. The difference between the trades and the comics are the comics, because they've got a finite print run, over time, some comics are going to be worth more than these trades. Collecting, right? And are you going to be able to retire off of these comics? Are you going to be able to buy a house with these comics when you're, in your 60s? Good luck with that. Chances are you're not going to have that same collectability with trades because they've got a higher print run. So if you're looking to get into comics, really for the fundamentals of reading the story, and you kind of come in a little bit late, trades are a great way to kind of get caught up, and to continue reading, you can pick up the new issues. If, however, you're looking to really just kind of collect, let's say you're a Batman fan, you're not really super into the stories, but you kind of want to get some of the key books, getting the single issues is kind of what you want to do. You want to talk about variants for a second?
Do I want to talk about variants? Sure. Variance is one of the more complicated aspects of this industry. One, primarily because it's a word that's thrown around all the time and has a lot of different meanings and can mean different things to different people, different things to different publishers. Industry-wide, a variant is a generic term for anything that is another cover from the regular cover. Generally speaking, every comic book has what we call the A cover. That's the main cover, the one you see advertised and whatnot. And then this same comic can be produced with other covers. Sometimes it's what we call an alternate cover. And an alternate cover is a regular priced comic just with the different cover from the A cover. Or it can be what we call a variant cover. Here at Black Cat, we consider a variant something that is based on the incentive of what you're ordering for the regular book. These kind of books you pay more for. These kind of are the ones that you see on eBay. They're the ones that you see online for much more than cover price, even though they came out that same week. You'll go into your shop and you'll see the regular issue of Detective, and then it will have the same number 960 bagged and boarded with a $25 price tag, and you won't understand the difference. Well, the difference is that for every one of the regular book or a certain number of the regular book that you ordered, you were able to get one copy of the fancy one. Maybe it's 1 in 10, maybe it's 1 in 25, 1 in 50, and so of course you pay more based on the rarity. And they usually put great artists doing fancy artwork for those covers to further incentivize you to pay the higher price point. It's really more of a collector thing, or more of a thing for people who like those specific artists or who really like a specific title. If you're just getting into comics, you may want to just set that aside until you're a little more comfortable in the water, as it were.
The thing to know when you come into a store is you might see, like this issue of Batman Detective number 960, you might see 2, sometimes 3 or 4 different covers. They look different on the front, but they'll have the same numbering. That means the cover itself is different, but all the interior art, all the interior design is all the same.
Page to page, exactly the same.
Right. So it can get a little complicated. Just know as long as the numbering's the same, it's basically the same book, just the cover on the outside's a little bit different.
In long-term value, they don't tend to change much. If you're just in it for the reading, pick the cover that you like the best and go with that one.
So besides trades, the other thing that you can do here at Black Cat Comics, let me get a visual aid 1 second. Oh, I'm stuck in the table. Is Black Cat Packs. You want to talk about Black Cat Packs?
Black Cat Packs. This is the Black Cat Pack for Cyborg Rebirth Volume 1. What we do, and a lot of comic shops do, is bundle the issues, the periodical issues that will be collected in the trade paperbacks. We do this so that you don't have to wait for the production. When number 5 when the last issue of that story arc comes out, we put the bundle all together for you. Sometimes you have to wait 2 or 3 months after that last issue to pick up the collection. This way you don't have to wait. It also lets you know specifically what the story arc is. We discount them a little more for the cover price, much like the trade paperbacks. And again, it also introduces the trade paperback people to the concept of reading periodicals.
Now, the main difference by, again, getting the collected version, these kind of larger books versus the single, is sometimes the collected version doesn't have the different covers for all the single issues. And sometimes they do. So it kind of depends on the publisher, and it kind of depends on the book. Also, some of them will have, some of the trades might actually have additional material. Not all, but some. They might have like sketch covers, or they might have like early art illustrations in the back that the artist was playing with for the series. So you might get
scripts sometimes.
Right. So sometimes you get more, sometimes you get less information and content in the trade. So it kind of just depends on the book. The other thing I wanted to talk about is the difference between trades, right? So these are called the trades.
Trade paperbacks.
Trade paperbacks and graphic novels. So again, think about trades as collecting the single issues, right? So these are kind of second print runs of things. Graphic novels are kind of books that look just like the trades. However, they were never in comic form before. That's the main difference. Graphic novel, brand new content in the trade kind of format, the larger book, were never comics to begin with.
So a trade paperback is a graphic novel, but a graphic novel is not a trade paperback.
The way we distinguish it here is a graphic novel was never in a single issue comic periodical form before. And what's nice about graphic novels is they're kind of complete one-shot stories. Like you don't have to worry, they're not really a series. They're kind of like one book tells the complete story, like our favorite here, Baldini, Dark Knight. Love it. You guys got to read this book. It's amazing. Okay, so let's talk about publishers next. Now, one of the things that really confused me starting out was a lot of stores still to this day kind of organize their product by publisher. If you're walking off the street, you just saw a movie, it might not be very clear to you that, let's say, Wonder Woman is DC or Spider-Man is Marvel. Comic book retailing really puts a lot of assumptions on you, the customer. Like, you know already what characters fall within which publisher. So let's talk about publishers for a second. Publishers are the ones that basically control the universe of characters, right? So they kind of like have this umbrella of characters and storylines that they kind of shepherd. They are the ones that control the artists. They're the ones that control the writers, the storylines, the arcs for the characters that kind of they own, like their properties. So for Marvel, you've got folks like, you know, all the Avengers movies, all the X-Men, all the Spider-Man stuff, Fantastic Four, all of that falls under the umbrella of Marvel Publishing. Stan Lee, everyone knows Stan Lee, Marvel. DC, another beautiful art by Alex Ross. That's your Batmans, your Supermans, your Wonder Womans, your Justice League, Green Lantern, Hellblazer for Constantine. What am I missing? Preacher, right? Some of the other stuff that you guys might be watching. So that all falls within the DC or Detective Comics umbrella of publishing.
A lot of the animation you see, Teen Titans, Titans Go, Batman animated series, obviously. A lot of the animated series, superhero stuff that you see is Warner Brothers and DC Comics.
Right. And so like Flash and Green Lantern, Arrow, thank you, on TV right now, Supergirl, all that falls within the DC umbrella, which is under the larger umbrella of Warner Brothers. So with anything within the Warner Brothers umbrella is kind of fair game for DC, which is cool because we just saw this team up between some of the DC characters like Batman and Wonder Woman and some Looney Tunes characters. So we saw Wonder Woman versus Tasmanian Devil and Batman and Elmer Fudd, and it was amazing, let me tell you. Okay, I digress. Those are the, when people talk about the main two,
the big two,
those two publishers, right, Marvel and DC, they account for probably, this has changed over the years, but it's probably at least 55 to 60% of comic book sales. Probably a little bit more.
It's probably 75.
It depends on the market. So these guys are the main ones that produce, you know, more than half of all the stuff that we have in our shop and more than half of all the books out there. Now, the other big two kind of fall right behind DC and Marvel are Image, right? Which is a really interesting publisher, which we'll talk about in a second. So we've got Walking Dead, Spawn, Savage Dragon, Saga, and Cyberforce. And then also Dark Horse, right? So you know and love Hellboy. Everybody knows those guys. They've got Serenity and Buffy and Angel and all those properties as well. Now, what's interesting about Image that's different from the other publishers is Image is creator-owned. So unlike DC and Marvel kind of control the universe, control the use of the characters and the properties that they own. Image, it's completely creator-owned. That means a creator, let's say Kazi, has an idea for a comic. He can go in, get his own artists, kind of do a bit of his own marketing, and pitch it to Image, and Image will basically print it and help to get it through the distribution. They don't have any kind of story editing or criteria, or they don't oversee his character development. So it's completely free. It's almost like what Netflix is doing right now with stuff. Like, hey, go make something awesome. We'll just distribute it for you. That's kind of what Image does with their kind of creator-owned stuff. So Image is really an interesting beast because Marvel and DC, their wheelhouse is in superheroes. Image is any and everything under the sun. They've got some detective stuff. They've got some great noir horror stuff. They've got, you know, Walking Dead comes from Image Comics. So it's not something you can really kind of put in a box. They're really kind of expansive, and their creative freedom has produced some amazing pieces of work.
And I might interject real quickly. For folks just getting into comics, I often recommend starting with Image because everyone knows their superheroes and has their favorites. But if you start with Image, you can expose yourself to all kinds of things that you wouldn't have ever known were even out there. And they have really, really great stuff. Yeah.
So beyond these top four, and some would argue if they're the top four or not. For us, that's kind of our main top four. There's probably another 50 publishers. You've got maybe more. You've got Archie, you've got Valiant, you've got Aftershock, you've got Boom Studios, you've got IEW, you've got
Dynamite, Slave Labor.
So many. So it can get really overwhelming fast, especially, again, if you're walking into a comic shop that's organized by publisher. You're not going to know Cyberforce is Image Comics. You're not going to know Spawn is Image. You're not going to necessarily know Batwoman is DC Comics. So it's kind of important to understand kind of publishers, what's under their umbrella, so you can navigate in your shops a little bit easier. Okay, the next visual I have, let's talk about distribution just for a second. This only affects the consumer kind of on those days when things kind of go awry at your shop on Wednesday. So it's a little bit of a disclaimer from the retailer's part on how distribution of comics gets to the shop. So how do you go from the publisher to the distributor to your actual retailer? So there's something in the universe called Diamond Comics distributor. Diamond Comics is the single distributor of all those main publishers we talked about. They've got exclusive distribution on Image, Dark Horse, DC, Marvel, and others.
Many, many more.
So what does that mean? That means that if you're a retail shop and you want to carry any of these publishers, you have to go through Diamond. Diamond, for lack of a better word, is a monopoly, right? So you have to work with them and their fulfillment to get your books if you're a retailer. They're not Amazon. We'll just say that. Diamond's not Amazon. We can go on and on, but that's a whole other topic. Because we don't have a lot of options as retailers, we're really dependent upon the fulfillment abilities of Diamond. So if your shop misses a book that's damaged, has some orders shorted, has one cover but not the other, their shipment's late. It's really not, I'd say 99% of the time, it's really not the retailer's fault or within their control. It's all this guy right here. So I tell you that just to give your retailer a little bit of love, a little bit of slack, because there's a lot of things that we can't really control. The other thing that people don't really realize is the ordering. So we all have to order all of our comics through Diamond as well. Now, Kazi, how much far in advance do you have to order comics?
3 months. 90 days out is when we've already ordered your book. So the book you see on the stands on Wednesday was ordered 3 months ago. So when the internet tells you the day before, hey, go buy this book, and you run into their shop and they don't have any, it's because 3 months ago, nobody really had any interest in that book, and so your retailer didn't know to order that many.
Right. The stuff that you see that shows up on Wednesday was ordered 90 days ago. So all of that history, all of that data of, you know, did it sell, the first issue sell? Were people talking about it? We have 90 days of information after we ordered it. And we really can't go back and change things. We can maybe add some more if we think it's going to be a hot book. But we really have to kind of look into a crystal ball and think, oh, I think we'll sell 50 of these. Let's put that magic number in and hopefully it'll work.
So when you hear about that hot book like Batman Elmer Fudd, for example, and you run to your store, as I say, keep in mind that it had been ordered quite a while ago, and that's why the shop has the quantities that they have.
Right. Okay, so now you've kind of got the ins and the outs a little bit. Now I wanted to turn over to Kazi and ask him, basically, how do you then get started picking up an issue that's right for you?
All right, so we've talked about what comics are. You've seen a movie, you have a friend, a person at work who loves comics, and you realize that this looks like something you want to get into. Now I've explained to you what the heck these things even are. So you've decided, okay, I want to get into comics. Well, think of me for just a second as you very far in the future, 5 years, 10 years, maybe 100 years, that's how old I look. A person passing sage advice to you. I say this because I wish the future me could go back to 1980 and say, Kazi, don't do that, do this. So there's things you want to think about as you get into this before it gets a little bit away from you. First of all, look around. There are, as she said, many publishers. Hundreds, thousands of titles, thousands of artists and writers and creators, and this stuff is, you know, $3, $4 a pop, and these add up fast. And so you want to make sure you're spending your money wisely. You want to make sure that you're buying something that you're going to enjoy. So the first question you want to ask is why are you here? Are you here for entertainment, or are you here for investment? I like to think that everyone is here in a sense for both. If you start comics because for the entertainment purpose, which I'd like to think 99% of us do. You start because you want to read these things or because you like art, and that's great. And if that's you, the further you go, you will buy something for investment, whether for cash or personal. Hey, I really love this character. I'm going to spend a little extra money on this really cool Batman book. These things happen. And I like to think that the reverse is also true. If you get into this under the impression that you're going to get rich buying comic books, you really end up becoming a reader and a fan of the art more so than an investor. And in either case, the same thing applies. You want to look around and you want to buy what's right for you. You want to buy it because you like it. I always say and have always maintained, if you buy what you like to read, then your collection will be fun and it will be valuable. At least to you, and that's true with everybody that walks in my door, with everybody in any comic shop ever. On a side note, one thing I always say is just because everybody buys a book doesn't mean you'll like it, and just because nobody buys a book doesn't mean you won't like it. If it strikes your fancy, check that book out. There are all kinds of books that I sell 2 copies of every month. But the 2 people that buy that book swear by it and love that book and buy it all the time. So again, don't necessarily listen to the internet or even to me. Buy what you think is cool, buy what you like to read. And that requires, again, looking around. There's all kinds of comics for all kinds of people, every kind of genre, from horror and science fiction and romance and all these different things. The diversity is more common than ever before. Growing up the 60s and 70s, everything was always superheroes, and you had to really dig for those other genres. But these days, everything is everywhere. Game of Thrones, whatever it is you want to talk about, has a comic. So like I say, get around, look what's out there for you. Second, it is important that you don't go too crazy. My shop, as you can see, is full of all kinds of titles, all kinds of things. And it's really easy to get into a shop and buy this and that and the other thing and try this and that and the other thing. And much like buying what you like, you got to kind of stay focused. You got to go a little slow so that you're not spending too much and buying all kinds of things that down the road you're going to have the remorse for. So there's why are you here? There's buying what you like. Once you've determined these 2 things, okay, I like Superman. Well then, much like she said about periodicals and things, comics immediately becomes 2 more questions. Do I buy the classic stuff or do I buy the current stuff? And much like entertainment or investment, I always like to think it's both. Since for the purposes of this panel, it's getting into comics, I will almost always suggest to just jump right in. Grab that latest issue. Hey, I want to read Superman. Okay, grab that latest issue. Even if it says part 17 of 24, grab that latest issue of Action Comics and just jump right in. Because in a sense, that's what comics have always been meant for. Is that a kid would walk up to the spin rack, grab that issue, and fall in love with that book. And if you really like that issue, then you can go back and pick up the collections of the previous issues of the run. Or you can just say, hey, this is great, I love it, and keep reading forward. I really, really encourage people to start with the new stuff first. That being said, in most cases, certainly in my example of Superman, there's 75 years of history, and a comic book guy such as myself can refer you to all-time great books, to just some classics that we think everybody should read, fun stuff to read, and you can totally become a huge comic book fan, collecting just the vintage books from the era that were of the books when you were a kid, to the graphic novels of the all-time great stuff like Dark Knight Returns and Kingdom Come and the things everybody knows. There's worlds of reading, years and years worth of reading of just the classic stuff, and there's nothing wrong with filling a library of just the classics and enjoying it. But again, for the purposes of getting into things, I like to recommend starting with the modern stuff, getting into the brand new things that the creators are producing today, and then going back and enjoying all the classic stuff while you're enjoying the modern things. And so again, take a look around, dive into these back issue bins, take a look at our back wall, your favorite comic shop's back wall. They're not all $500 books. You can find old comics for $5, $10. Pick one up, check it out just to see if that's for you. Check out a lot of the new stuff. As she said, there's lots of titles, even among different superheroes. Superman has 4 different titles. Batman has 8 different titles. If you don't like that one, pick up something else. Keep trying things, because there's, again, thousands of writers and artists out there, and there will certainly be one that's right for you. And another important thing to think about is storage. The one thing, especially with the new folks, the first thing that gets away from you is your stacks of comics. Kazi, I've got all these stacks all over my house. What do I do? Where do you put all these things? I'm going to tell you 2 things that are crucially important. One is your bag and board. I don't want to take this comic out because it's a cool little Batman, but this is your standard bag and board. This is your bag. This is your board. Here at Black Cat, it's 15 cents for the pair. I imagine you can pay as much as 25 cents at your local shop. The number one thing I hear all the time is, I ask people, bags and boards, and they say, no, I don't care, I just read them. And that's fine. Or they say, I'm not a collector, I don't care. And I totally get that. But believe me when I say that this is the best 15 cents you can spend for your comic. It isn't about preserving it for its eventual retail value. It's just about keeping it in the shape that you bought it. So 10 years from now, when you go, hey, I want to read Detective 960 again, it looks exactly like it did the last time you put it in the bag. I can't emphasize this enough. All the time I grew up, I didn't care about my books, and I threw them in some Xerox paper box, and I went back, and all my books were yellow and tore up, and if I had just stuck them in the darn bag, they would be much nicer. So even if you're just a reader, even if you don't care, spend the 15 cents. It's taking care of your book, and it feeds into step 2, which is boxes. In your bag and board, you can box these things very nicely and store them upright very nicely, and you can flip through them and take the one that you want out. You want to keep them in real comic book bags and boards, and you want to put them in real comic book boxes, similar to the ones we have here in our back issue bins. Again, it keeps your stuff looking nice for when you want to read them again 10 years, 20 years from now. But just as importantly, it keeps you organized. I'll tell a little anecdote. This one here is incredibly organized, much more so than I ever was. So when she started getting into comics, she would put them in the boxes, and she had the labeled dividers. And I thought how cute she is keeping it all organized. Well, one day it occurred to me that she could walk into a room and pick out any issue. You could say, go get Hellblazer 112. And she could walk in that room and get Hellblazer 112 in 2 seconds. And you can tell me, go in that room and get any book with Superman on it. And it would take me half an hour. I have thousands of comics with Superman on it. Could I find one in any reasonable amount of time? No. Why? Because I don't have bags of boards, I didn't have dividers, I didn't have real boxes, I just had a giant mess of comic books. And I didn't think I cared, but when you see them all organized and you see how easy and fun it is to get your stuff back out, you're really, really glad you did. The number one thing that guys like me get pushed out of comics for is a lack of organization, because we turn our house into a giant box of stuff. Keep these things fun, keep them functional, keep them readable. And again, that's you 10 years from now, 20 years from now. I'm saving you from looking at a giant mess and having to reorganize all these things. If you keep them in their boxes and you keep them with their respective titles, you can keep rereading them and keep enjoying them, and that's where you get the value for what you spend for it. So buy what you like. Only buy what you like. Try new stuff. There's lots of stuff out there, and store it properly. Store it correctly. The last thing I'd say, and this is just a little bit more advanced, but as you've gotten into comics, and you kind of know what you're doing, and now you're ready for the next step. Talk to people. I love the internet. Everybody loves the internet. It's chock full of information. If you're going to the internet, go to publisher sites. Like she says, she showed you some publishers. Go to marvelcomics.com, dccomics.com, imagecomics.com. I love the fan sites and all those kind of things, but they're hugely biased, and they're not often very factual, and they can convince you of things that you may not want to be convinced of. So talk to the publishers, because they're the ones giving you the facts. Talk to your local comic book guy. Ask your comic book guy for suggestions, because he's buried alive in this stuff, and he talks about, or she, they're buried alive in these things, and they talk to all kinds of people who read this stuff, so they'll have all kinds of valuable suggestions for things that you would like, not things that the internet traffic would like. And again, then talk to your friends. Talk to those people who also read comics. It's a really great time for books right now. So again, when you're looking for other suggestions, ask and dig through those publisher sites, because they're just chock full of great information.
So a couple things I'll add to that. A lot of our folks fall into comics because they love a specific artist, or they really love a specific writer. That's a great way to kind of expand your purview a little bit. So let's take my introduction into comics, which was Neil Gaiman and Sandman. So he's writing this book called Sandman. And it's beautiful art. The stories were absolutely incredible. And it made me fall in love with a series of artists and this writer who's now famous. Everyone knows him, Neil Gaiman. So within the comic world, artists and writers jump around to different publishers, different projects all the time. So you can, you know, if you've fallen in love with a writer and or an artist, follow them. Just keep following their career and see what they're doing. They're evolving as well. So if you like their stuff now, they're only getting better. So that's a great way to continue kind of expanding your purview into new and different comics.
Sure is. I'm really glad you mentioned that, because that's, I think, really, really key in telling folks that are just getting into it. Is find that writer and artist, a writer and or artist that you like, and buy whatever they do. In my case, let's say John Byrne. One of my first favorite guys was John Byrne, and he was working on Fantastic Four. And so I did exactly what I've been saying over the video. So as I continued to read his new stuff that came out, I also went back and bought all the other stuff that he had done before. And that was a real treat, because that turned me on to, you know, all the classic X-Men stuff that he did, and all these other things. And as I kept reading his stuff, I've been a fan for decades. And if you really like an artist, they'll turn you on to a character that you may not think you necessarily like. If you like a writer, Daredevil, I think, is a great example. Not a lot of people aren't immediately drawn to Daredevil, but if you like Brian Michael Bendis, you'll certainly love his Daredevil run. And so collecting by creator is a great way to get into comics.
The other question we get asked a lot by brand new folks is, once I've read them, now what? So we talked about how to store them, but over time you don't want to have your house, or maybe you do, you don't want to have your house turn into a bunch of comic book boxes.
Your wife doesn't want your house to turn
really
into a bunch of comic
not
book
so
boxes.
great to have your parents come over and be like, what's all this stuff? So you need to have kind of almost like an exit strategy, or like something that you're going to do for those comics that you know you read them once, you're never going to read them again. You know, do you want them to really take up space in your house, or do you want to do something with them? So there's a lot of great organizations like children's hospitals, vets, homeless shelters, all kinds of different places that you can take your comics. Libraries will take them once you're done with them. However, you do need to sort them from, you know, all ages versus not all ages. And believe it or not, 80%, 90% maybe even of comics these days are not for all ages. We've got an all ages section, and it's about 10% of the store. So most comics are for, you know, older teens and then adults. There's a lot of adult content in comics these days.
I love to recommend reading these things and giving them away. I love to recommend that, and obviously you're going to keep your favorite stuff and all like that. But as she says, we all buy books that we may not necessarily want to read 100 more times, that aren't going to skyrocket in value. Get those books into the hands of other people who will read them, enjoy them, create new comic fans.
Yeah. And like we've got something that we're doing tomorrow, which is a customer swap meet. So we're going to turn our parking lot into kind of a mini Comic-Con tomorrow. And so a lot of our customers who have stuff that they're not going to read again are going to be swapping them for somebody else's stuff that they're not going to read again. So we always say one man's junk is another man's treasure. It's going to be true tomorrow here at the swap meet for 12 to 4.
One thing I forgot to mention, last little side note, oh, maybe I have a couple more side notes.
One more thing.
It's about pricing. The price of a comic book is very complicated. Lots of things, as far as old books, I mean. We talked a little bit about variants. For the most part, if you're talking about new comics, brand new periodicals, you should almost never pay more than cover price for a new this week periodical comic. Comics run $2.99, $3.99, whatever the price is. If you're in your local comic shop and they want more than cover price for a comic that is new that week, ask them why. I'm not saying I don't have books out that week that we don't sell for cover. They could be variants, they could be a lot of things. But there would be a reason why, and you shouldn't overpay for anything. So if it's a brand new comic and they want you to pay more than cover, find out why. If it's a vintage comic like this super awesome Batman, there could be lots and lots of reasons for the price of this book. It might be $5 because it's all beat up. It might be $100 because it's pristine. It might look pristine and still cost $5 because the page inside says, "Hi, my name is Billy," with a big purple marker. You want to know why you're paying the price that you're paying for a book. You want to know that you're not overpaying for a book. Yes, some comics are expensive, but they don't have to be. And so know what you're paying for. And we'll talk about a little more about this in the next panel when you're talking about the pricing of vintage comics. But again, it's just a simple question. This detective right here is $20. When somebody says, geez, why is that comic $20? I could explain to them the grade that it's in, that it's a 1960s book, might be the first appearance of somebody, or blah, blah, blah. But again, understand what you're paying for, and don't overpay for books. Like any industry, there's going to be less than scrupulous folks out there trying to get top dollar for something that might not be worth it. Be a smart buyer.
That's great. And that's actually kind of something I wanted to talk about, which is finding a great shop. So this is a really complicated industry to kind of get into. You know, coming off the street, it's overwhelming to walk into a shop like this and know where to start and how to start. If you can't figure out the layout of the store, and or there's not somebody there to offer help within the first 3 to 5 minutes of you walking in the store, walk out. Our job as retailers are to welcome you into this very complicated industry and help you navigate and maneuver your way around. We're supposed to provide recommendations. We're supposed to provide you easy access to things that you want to try, and answer any questions like pricing, like variants, like trades versus graphic novels. Anything that we talked about today, your retailer should know about and should be more than willing to kind of educate you and help you along for the ride. So if you don't get that feel, if you get overwhelmed and you just can't figure out the lay of the land in the first few minutes, it's not the shop for you. Plenty of shops out there that are really going beyond and above the call of duty to kind of make you feel welcome and to make it an easy experience, an accessible experience to you. So frequent those shops because they want your business.
It's supposed to be easy and fun. I always say, start with the shop that's closest to you. The video that we do every week, I talk about your local comic shop. I'm always talking about your local comic shop. And if that's my shop, hey, great. If it's not my shop, I want it to be, again, easy and fun for you. So start with the shop that's closest to you. We all need our local business. But if, like she's saying, if that shop's not your shop, find another one. There's lots and lots of great shops all around the state, all around the country, all around the world. Find the store that's right for you. And because it's about the people, it's about your experience. Like I say, it's supposed to be easy and fun. And it's our job to make it easy and fun for you. So start with your local shop. If they're not cutting it, then find the shop that's right for you. You wouldn't eat at the burger place that gave you food poisoning just because they're right by your house. So don't get comic food poisoning. Go to a shop that has fresh, delicious comics.
The last topic I want to talk about is subscription or pull lists, and then we'll take some questions. So if anyone's got any questions, you can start typing them up, and we'll get to them next. So let's say you walk into a shop. You've decided you like a couple books, you want to keep reading them, but you can't be here on the dot when the store opens every Wednesday. You don't want to miss an issue. Most stores have what's called a pull service or a subscription service, where you sign up in advance for the 4 or 5 or 10 or 12 or 20 books that you're reading. And what they'll do is hold a copy for you so that whenever you can come in at your convenience, you've got your books for you and you won't miss an issue. Every shop does a little bit different. We've got an online form that people fill out, and then we hold books for them and they can come pick them up. Most shops don't charge for this service. In fact, they incentivize customers for signing up. So like most shops give you like a 10% discount. We do something called Black Cat Loyalty Program, which for every $100 you spend, you get $10 back, and something you can use in the store. So everyone does it just a little bit different. But if you do decide to get into comics and you've got more than 2 or 3 books that you're going to start reading on a regular basis, really look into the store's pull service, because you'll find a lot of benefits and advantages to you if you do that.
It's about your convenience, so you don't have to be there each and every Wednesday. But it's also partly because, as we say, comics have a very limited print run. Your store is going to sell out of that hot book. Every week there's a hot book that sells out, so you want to have your name on that list to make sure you get yours. Excuse me.
That's right. So I'm going to see if I can figure out how to find if there's any questions for you guys.
So don't get common food poisoning.
All right. I don't think we have any questions just yet. So, Klaus, you want to talk about the rest of the panels that we've got going on today?
Sure. So the next panel will be collecting vintage comics. It is sort of the, I don't want to say second step to this conversation, because not everybody's going to get into vintage stuff. But if you're a comic fan, or if you're just getting into comics and you'd like to know more about the world of classic comics and vintage comics, we're going to be covering a lot of that. For all of these things that we talked about, as far as getting into comics, there's just as many more details in vintage comics, all kinds of things to know about grading and conventions and online sales and back issue bins, all these things. So we're going to be talking the Overstreet price guide, all things collecting vintage comics. That's later this afternoon. And then this evening, we get into Superheroes Unleashed, Society and Our Need to Be Saved, where we're going to talk about our love of superheroes. Here we are in another era of people looking to superheroes for that sort of mythological reassurance. And then we'll be talking about where that comes from and why we go there and why we're there today. So that's our remaining two panels for panel day. And then, as you mentioned, tomorrow is the swap meet, and we always round out the pre-Comic-Con Comic-Con with the swap meet and the huge back issue sale. So you can come on down and sell and trade your wares, or you can just show up, buy some Black Cat bucks, and purchase our customers and subscribers' wares with your Black Cat bucks. Or you can just come and take advantage of our back issue sale, 75% off everything in these bins. If you're a person getting into comics, if you're watching this panel and you have an interest in just getting started, I always recommend taking advantage of those steep sales. Buy a little bit of everything, and just to see what you like. And if you didn't like it, you didn't pay a lot for it. And if you did like it, then you turn yourself on to a lifelong love of collecting. So yeah, that's our panels for today. Tomorrow's the swap meet, the big back issue sale. That wraps up the pre-Comic-Con Comic-Con. And then we do our little song and dance to get ready for next Wednesday. Then we're off to San Diego.
Woohoo. And you're going to be broadcasting live from San Diego?
Yes, from, again, every year when we get down to San Diego, I like to post little videos, probably more to the Facebook page than the YouTube thing, because I'm not tech savvy enough on my phone to post to the YouTube channel. But if you follow our Facebook page, you'll get all of our cool San Diego Comic-Con updates.
All right, so I think that's it.
I reckon that's it. We hope this has been helpful for you. We hope you learned something, and we hope you make use of that knowledge to become a lifelong comic book fan like we are.
Thanks for watching.